They thought it was just a class photo. For 118 years, that's all anyone saw when they looked at the faded black and white image from the Blackwood School for Wayward Children. A group of serious children sitting in neat rows, their teacher standing behind them with perfect posture. Nothing special, nothing strange. But in the year 2024, modern technology revealed something sinister that had been hiding in plain sight all along. Dr. Aris Thorne worked as a digital archivist at the Historical Preservation Institute in Boston. His job involved taking old photographs and documents and converting them into digital files. Most days were routine: scanning birth certificates, cataloging old maps, preserving family albums. But this particular Tuesday morning in October would be different. Very different. The Institute had just received a collection from the Blackwood School for Wayward Children. The school had closed its doors in 1947 after operating for nearly 70 years. The boxes contained ledgers, letters, and photographs that had been sitting in a storage facility ever since. Aris opened the first box and carefully removed a stack of glass plate negatives wrapped in old cloth. The first photograph he scanned showed the school building itself, a 3-story brick structure with narrow windows and a heavy wooden door. The second showed the dining hall with its long tables and bare walls. The third was a class photograph from 1906, 23 children arranged in 3 rows. The boys wore dark jackets and caps. The girls had long dresses with high collars. Behind them stood their teacher, Ms. Evelyn Reed. Aris placed the glass negative on his high-resolution scanner. The machine hummed as it captured every detail at 12,000 dots per inch. When the scan finished, the image appeared on his computer screen in stunning clarity. He could see individual threads in the children's clothing. He could count the buttons on their jackets. The detail was remarkable for such an old photograph. Something about Ms. Reed caught his attention. She stood perfectly straight with her hands clasped in front of her. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe bun. Her expression was stern but not unusual for teachers of that era. But something seemed off. Aris zoomed in on her face. Then he zoomed in further on her eyes. What he saw made him lean back in his chair. Ms. Reed's pupils were contracted to tiny pinpricks, just small black dots in the center of her pale irises. This was wrong. Completely wrong. The photograph had been taken indoors with the dim lighting typical of that time period. Human pupils should have been dilated wide to let in more light, not contracted like this. Aris checked the scanner settings. Everything was normal. He examined the glass negative under a magnifying glass. No damage or defects around the teacher's face. The detail was genuine. Those pinprick pupils were real. But how was that possible? He tried to focus on other work but kept returning to the photograph. There had to be an explanation. Maybe it was some quirk of early photography. Maybe the chemicals used in developing had caused this effect. But the more Aris studied photography techniques from that era, the more certain he became. This was not a technical error. His next step was researching the Blackwood School itself. The Institute's archives had limited information. The school opened in 1878 as a private institution for what they called wayward children. These were kids from wealthy families who were considered difficult or embarrassing. Parents paid high fees to have their children sent away and reformed. The records showed an alarming pattern. The school had an unusually high death rate among its students. In 1905 alone, 7 children died. The causes listed were always common illnesses: influenza, scarlet fever, pneumonia. Nothing suspicious on paper, but 7 deaths in 1 year at a school with fewer than 50 students? That seemed excessive even for that time period. Aris found the names of the children in the class photograph. He cross-referenced them with the death records. 3 of the children in that 1906 photograph had died within the next 2 years, all from fever according to the official documents. He returned to the box of photographs and found another image from the same day. This one showed a wider view of the classroom. The same children sat at their desks. Ms. Reed stood near a blackboard covered in multiplication tables. In the background, barely visible, was a medical supply cabinet with glass doors. Aris scanned this photograph at maximum resolution. He enhanced the section showing the cabinet. Through the glass doors, he could make out rows of bottles and vials. Most labels were too blurry to read, but one larger bottle on the middle shelf was clearer. The label read scopolamine. The word sent Aris down a new research path. Scopolamine was a drug derived from nightshade plants. Doctors in the early 1900s used it as an anesthetic during surgery, but it had other uses too. In certain doses, it acted as a truth serum. Police sometimes used it during interrogations. At higher doses, it became a powerful sedative. Too much could slow breathing until it stopped completely. The symptoms of a scopolamine overdose looked exactly like a severe fever: flushed skin, rapid heartbeat, difficulty breathing, confusion, and delirium, eventually respiratory failure and death. A doctor unfamiliar with the drug might easily mistake these symptoms for a natural illness. Aris needed more evidence. He dug through the school's financial records, box after box of ledgers and receipts. Most were routine expenses: food deliveries, coal for heating, fabric for uniforms. Then he found what he was looking for: purchase orders from Whitman Pharmaceutical Company, regular deliveries of medical supplies, including large quantities of scopolamine. The amounts were staggering. The school was ordering enough scopolamine to sedate a small hospital. The deliveries came monthly, sometimes more often. Each order was signed by Miss Evelyn Reed. She had complete control over the medical supplies. Aris created a timeline. He marked each scopolamine delivery on a calendar. Then he added the dates when students died. The pattern was undeniable. Almost every student death occurred within days of a new drug shipment arriving. Miss Reed would receive her supply and children would start dying. But he needed more than circumstantial evidence. He needed something that directly connected Miss Reed to these deaths. The answer came from an unexpected source. At the bottom of the last box was a leather journal. The name inside the cover read, Thomas Garrett, groundskeeper. Thomas Garrett had worked at the Blackwood School from 1898 until 1907. His journal contained daily observations about the weather, his garden work, and repairs around the building. But scattered throughout were comments about Miss Reed that grew increasingly disturbed. An entry from March 1905 read, The new teacher, Miss Reed, has strange methods. She gives the children her special medicine when they misbehave. They become quiet as dolls afterward. Too quiet, if you ask me. Another, from September. Young William would not stop crying yesterday. Miss Reed gave him a dose of her medicine. He has not woken up. They say it is fever, but I saw her give him that bottle. The entries became more detailed and frightened. October 19th, 05. I watched through the window as Miss Reed prepared her medicine. She measures it carefully, but I think she uses too much. The children stumble and fall asleep at their desks. Some do not wake up for hours. I fear some may never wake up at all. Then came the entry that explained everything. January 15th, 1906. The same day as the class photograph. Thomas Garrett wrote, The photographer arrived this morning to take the class portrait. The children were restless and would not sit still. Miss Reed became angry. I saw her mix a strong batch of her medicine and give it to every child. She said it would calm them for the picture. The entry continued. Within minutes they all grew quiet. Their eyes became glassy. Some slumped in their chairs. Miss Reed arranged them like dolls. She propped up the ones who could not sit on their own. Little Sarah in the front row was completely unconscious, but Miss Reed positioned her to look like she was merely looking down. The photographer took his picture while Miss Reed stood behind them all, smiling. The final part of that entry was the most chilling. After the photographer left, 3 of the children would not wake up. Miss Reed sent them to the infirmary. She told me they had sudden fevers, but I know the truth. She gave them too much of her medicine. I pray they survive, but I have seen this before. They rarely do. Aris stared at the journal entry. The photograph on his screen took on a new horror. This was not a class portrait. It was a crime scene. Those children were not posing. They were sedated, some possibly dying, arranged by their teacher for a photograph. Miss Reed had drugged an entire classroom of children just to get a perfect picture. He looked at the children's faces again with this new knowledge. What he had taken for serious expressions were actually the blank stares of sedation. Their unnaturally still postures were because they could barely hold themselves upright. Some were probably unconscious, propped up by Miss Reed to appear normal. And Miss Reed herself? Her pinprick pupils now made perfect sense. She was a regular user of scopolamine. She took it herself, probably to steady her nerves while she poisoned children. The drug would have given her a sense of detachment, allowing her to commit these acts without emotion. Thomas Garrett's journal had more to reveal. Over the next weeks, he documented the aftermath. Sarah Mills died 2 days after the photograph. The official cause was listed as scarlet fever. James Patterson followed a week later, supposedly from influenza. Margaret Brown lasted 10 days before succumbing to what the records called brain fever. The groundskeeper was terrified, but felt powerless. February 3, 1906. I know what she is doing, but who would believe me? She is educated and from a good family. I am just a gardener. The parents trust her with their children. They do not know she is slowly killing them. His entries showed increasing desperation. February 20th. I counted the bottles in her cabinet when she was teaching. She has enough poison to kill every child in this school. I must do something, but I do not know what. March 1st. Another shipment arrived today. More of her deadly medicine. How many more children will die before someone stops her? The journal entries stopped abruptly on March 10th, 1906. Aris searched the school records and found that Thomas Garrett had died on March 12th. The cause was listed as a heart attack. He was 42 years old and had no history of heart problems. Ms. Reed continued teaching at Blackwood School for 2 more years. During that time, 11 more students died from various fevers and sudden illnesses. She left in 1908, citing health reasons. The school hired a new teacher, and the death rate immediately dropped to normal levels. Aris searched for more information about Evelyn Reed. She had moved to Chicago after leaving Blackwood. She worked at 2 other schools for wayward children over the next decade. Both schools experienced unusually high student mortality rates during her employment. She died in 1921 from what was described as natural causes. She was never investigated or charged with any crime. The full scope of her crimes was staggering. Based on the records Aris could find, at least 37 children had died at schools where Evelyn Reed taught. 37 young lives ended by a woman who was supposed to protect and educate them. And these were only the deaths he could document. There were likely more. The photograph on his screen had transformed completely in meaning. What had seemed like a typical stern Victorian class photo was actually evidence of serial murder. Every element took on sinister significance. The way Ms. Reed's hand rested on one boy's shoulder was not protective, but possessive. Her slight smile was not satisfaction with her students, but pleasure at her control over them. Aris wondered how many other photographs from this era might hide similar secrets. How many group portraits might actually show victims and their killers? How many formal poses might actually be crime scenes? Technology had given us the ability to see details that previous generations could not detect. What other horrors were waiting to be discovered? He prepared his findings for publication. The academic community needed to know about Evelyn Reed and her crimes. Families descended from Blackwood students deserved to know the truth about what happened to their ancestors. Justice was impossible after so much time, but acknowledgement of these crimes still mattered. The story of the Blackwood School photograph spread quickly through historical circles. Newspapers picked up the tale. Documentary filmmakers expressed interest. The photograph that had sat unexamined for over a century became infamous overnight. People studied the faces of those children, knowing now that some were experiencing their final hours. Aris continued his work with the Blackwood collection, but with a heavier heart. Every document potentially held dark secrets. Every photograph might reveal hidden tragedies. He had learned that history was full of horrors that went undetected or unpunished. Evil could hide behind respectability and authority. Those meant to protect the vulnerable could become their greatest threat. The Blackwood School photograph now hangs in a museum dedicated to historical crimes. A plaque beside it tells the story of Ms. Evelyn Reed and her victims. Visitors often stand before it in silence, studying the faces of those long-dead children. They see what generations before could not. They see the truth that technology finally revealed. The photograph serves as a reminder. It shows that evidence of evil can survive long after the perpetrators are gone. It proves that secrets, no matter how deeply buried, can eventually surface. It demonstrates that the truth has a way of emerging, even if it takes more than a century. Some visitors to the museum ask why this matters now. Why dig up crimes from so long ago? The answer is simple. These children deserved to have their stories told. They deserved to be remembered as victims, not statistics in a school ledger. They deserved to have someone, even a century later, stand witness to what was done to them. Aris Thorne still works as a digital archivist. He approaches each new photograph with a mixture of curiosity and caution. He knows that any image might hold secrets. Any document might reveal forgotten crimes. His work has become more than preservation. It has become a form of detective work, uncovering truths that history tried to hide. The Blackwood School photograph changed how many historians approach their work. They now look closer, dig deeper, and question more. They understand that the official record often lies. They know that criminals can hide behind respectability. They recognize that technology can reveal what previous generations could not see. The 23 children in that photograph have become symbols. They represent all the vulnerable people throughout history who suffered in silence. They remind us that institutions meant to help can become places of harm. They prove that those in positions of trust can abuse that trust in the worst ways. Ms. Evelyn Reed thought she had committed the perfect crimes. She believed her victims would be forgotten, their deaths attributed to natural causes. She assumed her secrets would die with her. She was wrong. The evidence of her crimes survived in a single photograph, waiting for the right technology and the right person to reveal the truth. This story is not unique. Archives around the world hold similar secrets. Museums store evidence of crimes not yet discovered. Libraries preserve documents that could rewrite history. We have the tools now to uncover these truths. We have the responsibility to look closer at the past and give voice to those who were silenced. The Blackwood School photograph reminds us that history is not fixed. Our understanding of the past changes as we develop new ways to examine it. What seems like established fact might be carefully constructed fiction. What appears innocent might hide terrible secrets. We must remain curious, skeptical, and determined to uncover the truth, no matter how long it has been hidden. Like this video and subscribe for more stories that history tried to bury.